Welcome to this brief video about injecting techniques. I'd like to emphasise that this in no way is meant to cover the comprehensive students' notes. It's come about because experience has shown students tend to quite frequently make various mistakes in revision tutorials and also in OSCEs at the end of the year, and this video is meant to demonstrate how to avoid these. The first thing is to put a needle on a syringe and unsheath it without jabbing yourself. Now, this is rather unpredictable because the same batch of needles from the same manufacturer, you'll find that in most cases the sheath comes off well, but in other cases it seems to be extraordinarily difficult to remove the sheath, and it's quite unpredictable. And if you just try and pull on it the traditional way, you pull and pull, nothing happens. Eventually it gives way, and as a reflex action the needle comes back, and that's when most students injure themselves. So to avoid this, I'll show you a technique which might sound overly complex, but it is the safest way. Basically, you put the needle on the syringe with a slight screwing motion. Remember that if it's the drawing up needle, you don't want to put it on too tightly because you'll be removing it later, so you can put on the dedicated giving needle. Now, once you've done that in your right hand, if that's your dominant hand, you hold the syringe like that and use the thumbnail to hold the flange of the coloured part of the needle securely on the syringe. With your left hand, the ulnar three fingers go around your right hand, leaving only the thumb and index fingers free. And with the thumb and index finger, you gradually manipulate the sheath whichever way you want to. You can either twist it backwards and forwards or up and down. Eventually it'll give way, but when it does give way, it can only move a centimetre or so. It doesn't come off completely, and there's no danger of you jabbing yourself. So that's the first hint I wanted to show you. The second hint is to avoid dripping or spraying solution all over the place. We're using water here, of course, but in real life people use antibiotics and don't want all the bacteria in the room to become resistant to them. They're also often using quite toxic chemicals and don't wish staff to be exposed to it. Also, sometimes you can have people allergic to things, so you really don't want any extraneous stuff anywhere around the surroundings. The best way to do this is, if you assume that this is the giving needle, if you place the needle carefully in the vial, draw up more fluid than you need, then take the syringe and needle out of the vial and keep drawing back, so you now have plenty of air in the syringe, and all the little droplets of fluid that have been in the coloured part of the needle get drawn down into the syringe. Once you're happy that that's been done, then just very gradually expel the air and watch the fluid level come up through the coloured part of the needle, and just when it reaches the top of the coloured part of the needle, stop, because that way you've expelled the air, but only air and no fluid has come out. Once you've done that, put the needle back in the vial and get rid of any excess fluid until you've reached the mark that you've been given. Depending on the size of the vial, you might be asked to inject 0.5 ml or 1 ml or whatever, but once you're down to that level, you can take the needle out, and that way the excess fluid has been put back in the vial from which it originally came, and later on any remainder here can be disposed of properly in a biohazard container. The last thing I'd like to show you is how to give the injection itself. I've found that a surprisingly large number of times students remember that eventually they have to hold the syringe like that to actually give the injection, but they actually approach the patient holding the syringe like that, and that's not appropriate. I think for your own sake, and also to demonstrate to the examiner in an OSCE situation, it's best to have 3 separate and distinct grips. The first one is to hold the syringe like a dart or a pen. That's with your right hand, assuming that's your dominant hand. With your left hand, you do whatever is required. We'll assume that this is an intramuscular injection, so the fingers of the left hand stretch the skin. You want the needle to go in fairly close to perpendicular with a quick, decisive action. So you give the injection in a smooth but fairly rapid motion like that, preferably not putting the needle right up to the hilt just in case it happens to break at that point. It's very rare, but it can occasionally happen. So that was the first grip. The second grip, you no longer need the fingers of the left hand to do what they've been doing, so they can grasp the barrel of the syringe, and the right hand now comes to draw back on the plunger. In real life, it's the seal of the skin is always airtight, so you're pulling against a vacuum. There might be some temporary bubbles forming, but they will always disappear when you let go, and the plunger springs back with air pressure. When you're using simulators, sometimes the seal is not airtight, so when you pull back, you do get air into the syringe, but that never ever happens in real life. So you need to do that to make sure you're not in a blood vessel, because if you're trying to give an intramuscular injection, definitely you don't want to give any of it into a blood vessel. The final grip is the traditional grip of giving an injection, where you have your index and middle fingers under the flange of the syringe, the thumb on top, and you slowly and smoothly give the injection. Then you take the needle out of the patient, and immediately, the first priority, the whole unit, syringe, needle, everything else goes immediately into the sharps container, which is located nearby. Do not try and separate the syringe from the needle. Certainly never ever resheath the needle that's been in a patient, because that's when most needle stick injuries happen. So that's your first priority. Later on, you can use your cotton wool ball, micropore tape, whatever you wish. But the first priority, once that needle's been in the patient, out of the patient and immediately into the sharps container. I've seen too many instances in examination situations where contaminated needles have been waved around all over the place. Well, students get distracted with other things, so that's essential to avoid. So that's the end of this brief video, and thank you for watching it.